Episode 4, Chapter 2. Let's get started. Welcome to Tuesday Night Fiction, everybody. My name is Nicholas Austin. Today I'm going to be talking about a few different things. I had an interview, which was pretty interesting. My first author interview. Going to talk about some of the questions. And then content so far. So what we've experienced so far with chapters 1 and 2. Going to go take a little dive into that. Can't talk too much yet because we still have some spoiler alerts. We're still a little bit still world building, so there's only so much I can talk about right now, but we're going to go into what I can talk about. But before any of that, so I wanted to talk about just a few reminders. First of all, this podcast is officially up on your favorite podcasting directories. Super proud of that. Actually finally got it on iTunes, so I know I posted something a few days ago that said I was on all the directories kind of except iTunes, but on there, so you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, SoundCloud. Pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast. And if it's not there, if it's not on the podcast directory that you like, complain to me and don't offer any logical solution. That'd be your first option. Or what you could do is you could tell me which one it's on, and I could probably get it up on whichever podcast directory you like. So feel free to reach out if you're dying to get caught up, because this is going to be the 4th episode, so it's almost officially binge worthy. Maybe that's like 6 episodes, but actually, so for the 6th episode, one more reminder I wanted to give was also giveaway still going. Like I mentioned last week or the week before, or every week so far, that it's going to go through week 6. It's going to go through episode 6, the giveaway. So feel free to share the podcast in any format. You can share my website page if you want, but just mention the podcast in any way, and you will be eligible to win the first 3 books of the Civilands series, as well as a copy of Ready Player One. The books of the Civilands series will be signed by me. Ready Player One will not, but nonetheless, it's still a good book. So if you want 4 free books, just do that. Tag me, tag my social media. I'm mostly on Facebook and Instagram. But if you even just send me a screenshot of wherever you tagged it, you'll still be eligible. I'm just going to pick one winner, and then that will be the end of that. So again, that will be episode 6 after episode 6. So in episode 8, I will announce a winner, because that's the next one where I'm actually talking. And that one will be me recapping episode 4. So I'll announce one lucky winner then. And let's get off of that. Okay. So next, what's coming? Going to continue each week with these episodes. Every week I'm going to do my best to get a new episode out on Tuesday. Still filling out the podcasting experience. So if I ever have a hiccup and miss by a day or two, feel free to forgive me. And if not, come fight me. You can come to my door. It's wide open. I leave it wide open, and I have 2 pairs of boxing gloves out, so we can rumble whenever you'd like. But that's what is going to be the plan. Every Tuesday night, you can expect an episode. Sometimes maybe I'll delay it a Tuesday, but I'm going to do my best to be on time. Okay. Again, one more reminder. So anyone who's read my books, enjoyed them, want to share that with the world, feel free to go on Amazon, leave a review. I would always appreciate it. If you really like this podcast, you can now, since I'm on the directories, you can leave a review on the directories, and like, share, subscribe now that you have a place to do it. And I really appreciate it. Really appreciate everyone for being a part of the gang. Welcome to the gang. And we're going to share a little bit about your humble leader today. I'm going to go into as much detail as I can. I'm going to give you the inside scoop. So I shared the interview on my Facebook, but I had to kind of temper it, I had to kind of give the interviewer the responses that they were kind of looking for, like maybe the PC-ish version. And I want to give the real scoop today. I want to go hard. I'm going to answer all the same questions that they asked me, but I'm going to really try to go into it. And we'll see how much I can give you. It's still only episode 4, so I'm gonna try to ease into it over time, but you're gonna get the inside scoop. So, pretty excited for that. There was one part about me having a picnic with a bear. So listen through the rest of the episode. Maybe you'll find out a little bit more about that. And then so the last part is just going to be content. Going to be talking about where we are thus far in the series. We're 2 chapters in, so I can only do so much, like I said. But gonna talk about a few things that piqued my interest. So without further ado, let me find those questions really fast. And what questions they were. There were very, very many questions. So I think starting with number 1. So please introduce yourself and your books. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the questions. I'm gonna read you my answer that I gave, and then I'm gonna give you maybe a little bit more. So introduce yourself and your books. And I think this is kind of a helpful exercise. One, because I gave kind of a background last week, and I gave a background on like why I wrote. Today is going to be, these questions center a little bit more on the writing process. I'm going to try to make them also relatable to non-writers as much as I can, but this will hopefully help give a little bit more about who your humble leader is, and I give you a better understanding kind of where the series is going to go all the way through, for those of you who haven't read yet. In which case, buy the books and read, so you don't have to wait every week for an episode. But you could do whatever you want. If you like free things, this is a free thing. Anyway, so introduce yourself in your books. Okay. So I said my name is Nicholas Austin, creator of the Civilands series. Along with publishing my books in ebook and paperback, I also have a dramatic audiobook podcast called Tuesday Night Fiction. Then I just went on to say that the first 3 books are available, the Civilands series: Crimson River, Crystallize, Crescent Heart. Cryptic Kingdom is coming next in June. Super, super excited for Cryptic Kingdom. You don't understand. I've been waiting I feel like I've been building up to that book for a long time, and I just knew what the climax was for the longest time, and I think so. I didn't know exactly what the ending was going to be. I think I knew what the climax was going to be to Cryptic Kingdom from the time, either maybe towards the end of writing book 1 and maybe somewhat into writing book 2. And it's really good when you know where you're going, but it's also kind of makes the experience go a lot faster, which it's bittersweet, especially now. So like I'm on with Cryptic Kingdom, where I'm at right now is finishing up the editing. So my editor recently went out on maternity leave. She gave birth in early January, and she's actually just, what's today, the 2nd? She's just getting back to editing like yesterday. So very, very excited to get back into it. Big things to come in that book. And then once I finish that, book 5. I assume I'm going to start writing almost as soon as I finish editing book 4. We'll see about that now with the podcast. It might be a lengthy process, especially because book 5 is going to, I can't even imagine how massive the scale is going to be. It might be another 10, 20,000 words than any of the previous books. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I assume I'm projecting sometime in 2020. My projections for every book I've written have been wildly overstated. So we'll see. I'm only giving the year for this one. But yeah, so please introduce yourself in your book. So I want to say a little bit more about me and my books. I never really was a writer. I don't know when it started. I guess, let me clarify. I was always a writer. I was always a music writer. I was always into playing music. And from the time I started playing music, I started writing music. I never was the kind of person that was just doing covers. It was never my thing. I think when it comes to creating, we're gonna get more into this in a future question. But when it comes to creating, being original is like honestly the only important thing that I really value, and that really sounds hipster. So let me clarify it a little bit. I like being surprised. I don't really love it when a story is what the writer wants it to be for me. I don't really like reading something I expect or watching something I expect. It just doesn't really change the game as much, I guess. And that's kind of why I guess like my books are kind of twisty and turny a little bit, and just completely revolutionary, you know? Like they're like probably the greatest thing you'll ever read, and because I'm super original, and that's just the way it is. So when you read, if you ever get the feeling that you feel like your limbs tingling a little bit, don't panic. It's okay. It's normal. I've gotten that. People have said that to me many times. They don't usually know what to do with themselves. Sometimes it's like a new feeling, you know. It's like kind of like when you're a kid and you're going through, you know, the puberty, and it's just a hard thing. It's a hard thing to deal with. It's unfamiliar, you know. So when you come to that, when you start reading and you get to or listening, if you're only listening, because believe me, I get it. If you're only listening, I'm not the biggest reader ever. But when you're going through it and you're just like, holy shit, this guy really knows how to tickle my funny bone without touching me, which is the strange part. It's kind of like maybe it's like your ear funny bone, or your ear. I keep forgetting I'm not playing music. Well, actually I am doing an audio. I'm doing a podcast right now. Yeah, it is your ear. So I'm going to tickle your ear funny bone for the next 52 weeks, because that's about how many chapters we're going to have. Wait, no. 104 weeks, because we're going to have 52 chapters and an additional talking episode for each chapter. So get your ears ready. I'm not going to violate you. It'll be gentle and it will be consensual. But just be ready for surprises along the way, and some of the greatest storylines you've ever heard in your life. These are characters that you will relate to more than your own family. They will become your family, and you can bring your family with you if you want. This is a journey, and we are all in this together. So yeah, hop on the wagon and let's do this. That's question number 1. See, now let me go through this for a second. Let me review for a second. My response for this interview was maybe 20% of that. We're going to go through each of these questions, and I'm going to continue along in this fashion of not being humble and bragging at the same time as not being humble, and also giving you what you need to know about what's to come in this series and bonding with you, because that's what we do. We're fireside right now. We're fireside. Okay. Next question. What are the stories behind your books? The stories behind my books are manyfold. So now, first I'll give you the response that I gave. So the Civilands series is a fantasy western adventure. However, the stories behind it are very much character focused and centered on finding your place in a large, at times overwhelming world. True. I started writing the series shortly after a college experience in which I was on a journey west of my own. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last discussion episode, but I went to the University of Texas, and I'm from New York, and I've stayed in Austin, so literally I went on a journey west. And it's Texas, so Wild West. Where am I? So I think what I've taken from my experiences has been translated onto the page in some ways. Themes of family, justice, morality, religion, and personal growth are what make this series what it is. Without going too much into the story itself, period. That's the end of the last sentence. I didn't really read that right. If I was to summarize, I'd say Game of Thrones meets Gangs of New York meets Manifest Destiny. We talked about Manifest Destiny a little bit last week. But that's I think whenever I meet people and they ask me about it, that's usually the description I give. People like to have things compared because they can't understand things when they're not compared. Kind of like lists. People like lists a lot. I don't really know how to give this to you in a list form, so I'm just gonna. Well, actually, the interview is in a list form, so here are 10 questions about Nicholas Austin. Yeah, so the stories behind the books. Really, it's just about me and how great I am. And that's pretty much it. For 52 chapters, like I said, it's just me talking about me in the lens of kind of like a King Tut type figure. And in the end, they make me into a mummy and they celebrate me for all time. And that's the story. Next question. What inspires or inspired your creativity? Well, this is a complicated one. What I said in the interview was that besides the experiences mentioned above, I'll add that I was also inspired heavily by the rise of fantastic television shows True. Since I didn't know much about script writing or composition, I decided to translate the story in my head to book form. Some favorites at the time were Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, and Fargo. However, I was also inspired by shows I wasn't as crazy about, such as The Walking Dead. My criticisms of shows like The Walking Dead played a big part in getting me to do my own creating instead of continuing to rip the hair out of my head in frustration. Let me clarify. The Walking Dead was one of the most potential shows I've ever seen, and was also the biggest letdown of any show I've ever seen, or any, maybe not the biggest letdown. The Last Jedi was probably the biggest letdown of any entertainment form I've ever seen. But the reason why The Walking Dead lost me was specifically, I don't remember if it was season 6 into 7, whatever the season was where Negan is getting ready to smash someone's head in with a baseball bat. We knew that was coming from the end of the prior season when we first find out Negan is part of the show. And then we wait an entire season for that one scene. I mean, they literally spend the whole season just doing normal The Walking Dead stuff up until the end where Negan has all our main characters in a line and he's getting ready to smash one of their heads in. This is the last episode of the season. Now, mind you, The Walking Dead also has mid-season finales. So, we already had to wait 6 months for the second half of the season to find out who Negan was going to bash in. Meanwhile, again, we've already gone 5 or 6 seasons of the same crap, of them finding a group, the group being mean, they fight the group, maybe someone dies, probably not. Sometimes they do, but here we are. So don't get me started on this. So I'm already started. They don't show who Negan kills at the end of the season. They just have Negan smash in the camera, basically, and you don't end up finding out who it is. You don't know who it is. Now, I felt betrayed by that. Besides the fact that there are a lot of just actors on the show that just drove me crazy. One, for example, was that old guy who, spoiler alert, died pretty early in the show. I don't remember his name. I don't really care. I really dislike the guy. You guys might know who I'm talking about if you've seen the show. But he was always just bitching about every decision that was made by the other characters. Like, he would always just complain. He'd always whisper like some kind of like child to everyone else. Like, are you sure that Rick is making the right decision here? Like, are you sure? I don't know if he is. And it's like, okay, guy, make a decision then. Yourself, idiot. Why do we have to listen to this all the time? That's the kind of character that drives me insane. And I guess it's kind of realistic, maybe. But, like, anyway. They built up 6 seasons to that scene to show nothing, to make you wait another 6 months to find out who the character is. I wonder, did they even know who they were going to kill? Did they even know? And I don't doubt that they didn't. But it's pathetic that they didn't. And this was me prior to starting my writing journey. This rant was me almost all the time with shows like Walking Dead or other ones that I didn't like. And because I didn't want to be negative, I decided that I thought about it for a second, and I said, you know what? I'm a creative genius, so I'm going to start writing myself. And that's what I did. I started writing myself because I'm a creative genius. And from there, voila, the Civilands series began. Next question. How do you deal with creative block? What I said was, as soon as I'm feeling creative block, I just stop what I'm doing and work on something different. Even if it's just for a short period of time. End of sentence. Jesus, I can't. Having trouble reading today. I found that if you put an idea away for a little while and explore whatever is on your mind at the moment, the current thing can help develop ideas for what you were working on before. Also, when the lightning eventually strikes, you figure out what was missing. And you figure out what was missing. It's the greatest feeling in the world. I'll say this. Only the last sentence is true. I remember there was this one time where I was struggling with a character. And I was struggling with the backstory. I didn't know what to do for the character's backstory. I needed to make it make sense, and I needed to give them some kind of motivation or explain their motivation with a backstory. I had creative block. I put the idea away. I literally stopped writing for maybe a week. I didn't think about it at all. But I didn't stress about it either. I wasn't worried that I wasn't writing. I just stopped writing and did other things. And what ended up happening was I ended up driving on the way to work, and it just hit me. It just hit me. Specifically, the character was Dominic Turner, who you now know, and I can talk about. And I will talk about more later in a little bit. But it just, in the car, the entire backstory, the entire motivation, the entire reason for everything that I couldn't figure out hit me. And that, it is the greatest feeling in the world. It literally made me scream like a little girl in the car on the way to work and cheer. No joke, I did that. It's not even, and it wasn't even calculated. It just comes, it's just like, and you just can't help but cheer and be very happy. Now, on the other hand, I never have creative block, and I don't struggle with anything ever. Next question. What are the biggest mistakes you can make in a book? I said not getting an editor. Having an alternate set of experienced eyes is a must, because when you write, there will be mistakes. It's just a matter of finding them. It's just a matter of finding them all, which you really can't do on your own. That is true. Besides, for me, I don't have an editor, and I don't need one. I'm a genius. Next question. Do you have tips for choosing titles and covers? This is a question I almost chose not to answer because I don't know how you teach genius to people. I know that it's important to be consistent from book to book, stay on brand. Also keep things simple, especially with covers. The same way with logos. It's very important to keep things simple. Just look at the Facebook logo. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but we're not all geniuses, so some people just don't know. How do bad reviews and negative feedback affect you, and how do you deal with them? Here is my response. If they don't like it, it's not for them. I've had enough good reviews and gotten enough joy out of the writing experience and how much it's bettered my life that nothing anyone says could ever take away the value of the words or story for me true. Not everyone's going to like your work in the same way. Not everyone will like you as a person, and both of these things are okay. False. Everyone likes my work and everyone likes me as a person, so that was a lie. Next question. How has your creative process improved over time? I didn't answer that question. But since this is a bonus scenario and you get all the inside scoop, I will answer it here. My creative process was perfect from the time I was born. Next question. What were the best, worst, and most surprising things you encountered during the entire process of completing your books? I said editing, and editing. It's the best because you get to see how much your word child can grow and feel the pride of it becoming the best version of itself it can be. It's the worst because reading the same thing 100 plus times over and over isn't fun no matter what it is. Surprising because you never expected to see so much red anywhere other than a battlefield. Kind of all a lie. The best part of completing my books was finishing them and realizing I don't need to pay for an editor because this is perfect. The worst part was when I came to that realization, I kind of also felt bad for people who do need an editor because everyone else definitely needs an editor. It's very important. The last part, what was surprising, let me think of just how great I was at writing. Next question. Do you tend towards personal satisfaction or aim to serve your readers? Do you balance the two, and how? I think you know the answer to this one. But I'll read my response. Personal satisfaction. I wouldn't find the passion in it if I wasn't telling the story I wanted to and or needed to tell. So in that way, I don't really balance the two at all. Personally, I also prefer consuming stories that surprise me, rather than stories where the writer writes what they think I want them to write. So I talked a little bit about that earlier. Do I tend towards... I really don't balance the two at all. And here's why. When I was young, my mom took me to the doctor, the psychologist, to be more exact. And the psychologist gave me a test. At the time, I had no idea what the test was about. He just put this test in front of me, and there were like 150 questions. My mom didn't tell me this until later in life, because the doctor was worried about the effect it might have on me to talk to me about it. But the test was an IQ test, and I scored a 250. So when it comes to worrying about what my readers want, I know that my opinion is way more important than theirs, and they'll either like it or they won't, but if they don't, it's because they simply don't understand it, because my IQ is incredibly high. Next question. What role do emotions play in creativity? What I responded was, I want to say a big part, but I'm also right-brained and think there is art in math too. So it could be a very methodical process or completely emotional. Depends on the person and the timing. What I meant was, yes, I'm very good at math because I'm a genius. So emotions play no part. Do you have any creativity tricks? What I said was, as a musician, mixing music with writing is great, especially for the podcast where I'm writing backing scores. Mixing it up between the two mediums helps me to get the juices flowing. Music tells stories itself too, so the combination creates a full picture. Creativity tricks. I think that pretty much describes it. Just be a virtuoso And when you're good at everything, it comes much easier. So try to do that. What are your plans for future books? Again, talked about this one earlier. Not going to read exactly what I wrote, but finishing up book 4, then working on book 5. And then I think the next book I'm going to work on, I'm not totally sure yet, but it's going to be something along the lines of The Crucible, only 100 times better. Last question. Tell us some quirky facts about yourself. Okay. So what I wrote was I once had a picnic with a bear, which may or may not have influenced the content and cover of my first book. I like to think it did. I also have a border collie lab mix named Luna, fact, and I'm a big hockey and college football fan. Also have a reputation among my circles for eating maybe too many beans. There's also no such thing as eating too many beans. Okay. Beans. So let me start with the beans. Beans are a delicious and nutritious item, food, whatever you'd like to call it. Eat more beans. When it comes to the bears apparently enjoy a diet of carrots and sweet potatoes. So basically I laid out a blanket. I brought a basket of sweet potatoes and carrots, walked out into the nearest field, waited, and then the bear showed up, and we had a nice time. I recommend it. They are nicer company than you would imagine. In fact, let me show you a picture really quick. They even smile for the camera, and that's a fact. Pretty exciting stuff. Another quirky fact is that I'm also a great interviewee. Ask me questions. I will give you the honest answers, the honest facts. And sometimes I'm really sarcastic. But other times I'm not. And I kind of have that switch. If you go on my Instagram stories, you'll see that it's almost difficult to tell sometimes. Like, is this guy dumb? Is he a genius? Who knows? Last episode, he seemed serious. Is he being serious here? Your guess is as good as mine. But to get a little bit serious, let's talk about the content. Let's talk about chapters 1 and 2 and where we are now with the story. By the way, that interview was just a bit of fun. Hope you enjoyed it. I am a genius, though. Okay, content so far. Again, I can't only go so much into this, but I will tell you as much as I can tell you. So first I wanted to talk about who my favorite character is to this point. And I'm going to talk about that through the context of then and now. So when I was writing this, and then also now as I reread through it. So then, my favorite character was Dominic, up to chapter 2. And the reason why is because Dominic was, one, the hardest to write. In fact, my story about when lightning struck in my car on the way to work, which was true, even though most of what I just said was a joke. The character that lightning struck for on the way to work was Dominic. His backstory, both with being a member of a gang in the past and being involved with Jeannie's family, are two things that I struggled to figure out, actually. Initially, all I knew was that I wanted him to be this illusionist character. Now, two movies that I'm definitely very much inspired by are The Prestige and the movie The Illusionist. And I thought it was really interesting to have a character like that who was kind of like a Swiss Army knife kind of deal. In fact, from going back to talking about The Walking Dead, which again was actually one of the few things I said earlier with that to the interview questions that was true, was that the character Daryl from The Walking Dead actually was one character that I really liked for that reason. He was a Swiss Army knife. He was a good man in a rough man's shell. And he was able to do the things necessary to be a good man. But like all good men, we all have flaws. So Dominic's flaws, you'll find out more about, especially in the next 2 chapters. But for now, you can see he is definitely a very interesting character, very mysterious, probably easily the most mysterious character through the first 2 chapters, and that Hansa is still finding out who he is. Now, as I read back through, it's hard for me to not be biased, because another thing that I will go into talking about is which 2 characters this series is really about. And one is Laterra. I can tell you that now. The other, I'll tell you both now. The other is William. So this series really became about Laterra and William. And I can't deny that now looking back at it as it shaped more into being about those 2 characters, and again, I will tell you why in the future. But as it became that, I really started to think through the lens of those 2 characters as I told the entire story. And that was harder to do maybe in the beginning because I am using multiple points of view. In this book, I think I have 6 different points of view. But now that I read back through it, William's only had 1 part so far, so I think seeing Laterra's experience in the Riverlands in chapter 2 really, really, rose her up a notch to just if I'm picking a favorite at this point. And the reason why, so Laterra's fall. The experience in the Riverlands with the lion's paw pin being blown up into the sky represents Laterra's fall. Prior to this was a very reserved girl. She didn't really know much about the outside world because she chose not to. She chose to be ignorant, which isn't a bad thing. It's a self-defense mechanism. And for her, everything happens at one time. And I don't think that is necessarily an abnormal thing. For me, it was the same. For me, I experienced that same type of fall. And I'll go into that in a second. But Laterra's fall comes in the form of losing her father, losing her brother, finding some kind of hope for peace, and then having it seemingly shattered as the camp gets attacked. And she just has to kind of sit back and wonder what can she do about it, because she's never done anything about it before. And that moment is a matrix breaker. It can break you, and it can send you down the wrong path, or it can reshape you. And for Laterra, we're going to find out which way she goes. And I will say this: where I was when I wrote this book, it might surprise you where it goes for certain characters. It goes in different directions for different characters, but it might not be what you expect. I wasn't in a dark place when I wrote this book. I was in a dark place leading up to this book. So now let me go into the two moments that inspired Latera's breaking point. So one was when I believe I was in 9th grade in high school. And this is obviously way before I started writing. Way before I started writing this series, way before I even thought it a possibility. But at that time, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And up until that point, no one in my family had even died before. No one had had a disease like that. Death wasn't even on my radar at all. I had a big family, so it was just strange for someone that close to you to be kind of that first experience with that. Now, my breaking point. So cancer by itself, I mean, it comes in different stages. You could have stage 1 to stage 4, and it varies in seriousness by those stages. So at the time, my mom was diagnosed, I believe, with stage 2. In my school, one of my close friends at the time, her mom also had been diagnosed with cancer. She had been diagnosed a couple months before. Unfortunately, along the way, she died. So this was my frame. No one else I knew had cancer. No one else I had really been close to that I was aware of had died. I was ignorant, like Latera was ignorant. Because even if it happened, I hadn't seen it. I hadn't been exposed to it. I didn't really understand that it could even be a real possibility. And so I was moving forward, smashed into that reality. Face first, watching the person who had been my hero since the time I was a child. And honestly, one of my only heroes, because I was taught growing up not to have heroes that weren't family, which was a great lesson. So my mom had to go through chemo, radiation, and surgery. Chemo, I believe, was last, or maybe, no, radiation was last. But the chemo was by far the worst part. I remember, and chemo is cancer. Chemo is itself cancer. It is itself a just poisonous drug. And it changes you from the inside out. And one day, and again, for context, I am the eldest brother of 2 in my family. One day, I came home from school, and my brother came home from school, and my dad was at work, and my mom was on the couch. And this is not a woman who ever gave up, ever. And taught me never to give up, ever. And me and my brother went over to the couch where she was laying there after chemo treatment, just weak and just not herself. And we came over, and what she told us was that this was the end. She said that she couldn't go on anymore, and that she told me to take care of my brother, and she said that it was over. And I stayed there with them for as long as I could handle, until I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, I kept reassuring her as much as I could, but I didn't even recognize who I was reassuring. It wasn't the same person. Because like I said, that person wouldn't have given up. And I just said at some point I was going to go take a shower. And that was the lion's paw pin rising up into the air. I walked upstairs. I got to my room. I laid on the floor and I didn't stop crying. I couldn't stop crying. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't the same person. And I would never be innocent again. I would never be unharmed again. And I went in the shower and I didn't know what was tears and what was water at that point. I was on the ground and I stayed there for a period of, I couldn't tell you how long. And sometimes we go through that kind of period. And who we come out as on the other side is not, it's not the same. Internally, you have instincts that react in similar ways, but you don't know who you will become when you go through the loss and the trials. And my mom made it through, even though she said she wouldn't. She made it through because we fought for her to make it through, because family is everything. And with family, you can do anything. And that's not so obvious anymore. People don't fight for that as much anymore, but it's true. And I can't tell you how proud I am of that woman, but I can tell you that it's the realest thing that you can ever go through. And it will make you better. And that, it might not happen immediately. You might get worse at first. And there will be experiences that I'll talk about also that where I did get worse at first. Sometimes you become the bad guy. And that is why I think William is the second most important character. So William, we meet in chapter 2, and he's a little more, his experience is a little bit more silly. His is a little bit more of a happy introduction for him anyway, not for the people that he is kind of invading. The reason why it's called Our Feast, Their Famine, the chapter, is I think pretty clear. Sometimes we don't see the effect we're having on other people. Sometimes we come out of a period of our own trauma, like William with his own father, and it's easy to be self-absorbed. It's easy to not be able to see the wrong you're causing. But where these two characters will go from here is either towards the mountaintop or down into a pit. And they might fall again. Sometimes we fall more than once. But the fall is the most important experience we can have. I mean, if I hadn't gone through that, the world would have caught me later in a way that I wasn't ready to handle. And maybe it did in some ways, and maybe it did in some ways that it didn't even register. Because I was ready. But I wouldn't have been. I know I wouldn't have been. Jesus, that got real for a little bit. So, hopefully that's a little more enlightening than the interview. I'm not a genius. I joke around sometimes. I usually try to be not serious, but these books are serious, and the journey that the characters go on is serious. It's my journey, and it's everyone's journey. It's not just mine. Everyone goes through these things. Everyone has anxiety. Everyone has a fall. Everyone rises from the fall. Everyone rises from the fall in different ways. Through Latera and William in particular, we're going to see a lot of how that rise happens, whether it happens, and hopefully you see a little bit of them in yourself. Hopefully maybe they what they go through and what I go through and what I'm describing here either helps you or maybe or at least you could just relate to it. But we'll see. We'll see as we go. Again, as I've said before, this is our gang, not just mine. Anyway, to finish off, I'm only going to talk a little bit longer. I think I'm probably going to try to keep these episodes to like 50 minutes. I think that's a good amount of time. I'll just, again, to talk about, in each of these episodes, I'm going to talk about literally anything. I don't even know. I'm just ranting at this point. Sometimes I'm going to do things like that interview where I'm totally joking around, totally being sarcastic. Again, I said I was a genius a bunch of times. I was definitely kidding. But I hope you enjoy it anyway. I hope you got at least one laugh. I think one laugh would be satisfactory. I would take that as I'm a comedian at that point. I'm also a great comedian. I'm a better comedian than most people. But to end on a note that's also constructive and not a joke. I just wanted to talk about a few things for my podcasting experience, because I've had people ask me, in particular about voice acting, so that's one thing, and then also about technology, so podcast kind of technology. I don't know if I think podcasting is very valuable for a lot of different reasons, and just in case you want to start one, I just figured I'd share just a little bit of information. So to talk about first, I guess technology, what I'm working with is basically this mic, this MXL 990. I run that through a Harbinger. Is it Harbinger? Yeah, it's Harbinger mixing board, and then feed that into a Zoom H4n Pro as my recording device. And then also I'm working with a Logitech HD 1080p webcam. Very simple setup, very cheap setup, but definitely gets the job done. And then I also run the audio through Adobe Audition, which is great for noise cancellation and all sorts of things. I will say that in my second episode, my first discussion episode, that sound quality was a little less up to par. So sorry, like I said, I'm working through kind of figuring out what podcasting means and how to make this experience better and better. So hopefully every week I'll be able to do that. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it anyway. Hopefully, I think the sound came through. If you have to increase the volume on your headphones a little bit, I think it wasn't too low that it was just unlistenable. But if it was, let me know, and maybe I can look into correcting it. Although I honestly don't think I will. So just deal with it and shut up. Finally, voice acting. So a lot of people would laugh about the fact that once I said I was doing the reading of the podcast, like in particular what it's like to read as a girl. And it can be very funny. It can be very funny hearing yourself talk and trying to do a woman's accent, or not a woman's accent, but a woman's like inflection, and then also the southern accents, and then also any other accents, because there are going to be a couple others. But what I can say is, in terms of voice acting, so I'm not a pro. I'm not even close to a pro. I don't need to be a pro, and I don't care to pay a pro. The story is the story, and I kind of try to only do accents and only get into character where I feel like it doesn't sound ridiculous. And I mean, if it does sound ridiculous, then at least you'll get a laugh out of it. But one interesting tidbit that I found online is that when you're reading, for the authors out there who are doing audiobooks or for whoever, when you're reading a woman's voice, the difference between a woman's voice and a man's voice isn't necessarily like talking really high or anything. It's more like, for a woman, women kind of end on a high, whereas men kind of go and they get lower as they go, right? You can kind of hear it in my voice as I go, right? You hear me going up and then down. But for a woman, they kind of go up as they go. They kind of go a little bit higher as they go. And that's kind of, you don't necessarily have to sound like the pitch of a woman, I think, as a voice actor, but as long as you kind of hit somewhat along that inflection, that it becomes kind of clear. But who am I to say? Honestly, I might sound completely ridiculous when I read. Again, you can let me know about that in the comments or reviews or whatever. Any feedback would be much appreciated, and I can work on it from there. But as for the rest, as I've said, I think I've said it before, but I'm the one doing all the music. I'm doing the scores for the podcast, which is a lot of fun. I've always been a musician, and I've always been very much into creating music, writing music. So it's a lot of fun. I think audiobooks, from my experience with audiobooks, is they're much more interesting with music. I don't know what percentage of audiobooks like include music. I think not a lot, but from what I've seen and what I've heard in my own experience of doing this, it sounds way better. I mean, it kind of sounds like a TV show or a movie where the music adds to the experience, and music can tell a story even without a story being told over it. So there's almost like two different stories being told. Well, not two different, but hopefully they act in conjunction together. They work together to tell a better story. The music is kind of like, if you were to, it kind of works in the same way as if you were to, like, for a movie, when you have a picture and you have a picture that accurately describes kind of the story that's being told, or if you have different visual settings, like visual editing settings that make the story richer in some kind of way. That's kind of what the music does, and it just helps to create a fuller picture. But as always, so to wrap up, if you have any questions about anything, writing, podcasting, anywhere along the writing or podcasting like spectrum, you could be editing, it could be uploading and publishing. Or just about the books, we're now 2 chapters in. I could answer up to those 2 chapters. I won't give any spoilers, but if there are any questions or any thoughts, or you just love it so much that you just want to tell me that, or you hate it so much. So I know that one of the questions earlier was what do you think about bad reviews? And here's what I honestly think about bad reviews. I honestly think that my response was pretty accurate in that there's literally nothing you could say that would make me upset or like feel worse about the story or feel like it's not worthy. Some of the things that I will talk about in the next episode, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to write that down right now, but one of the things that I will talk about in the next episode are early cringe. So like reading your early work and feeling a certain way about it, or feeling or seeing where you've improved over time. And then also, what was I talking about? In terms of people disliking your story, you're telling the story that you want to tell, and there's nothing more valuable than that. There's nothing that will make you feel better than that. And if you're doing it for you, then it doesn't matter what people think. I mean, them liking it or not is just a bonus. So early cringe and also follow up. Okay. Sorry, just getting my thoughts down. But yeah, so I mean, if you're writing for you, which you should mostly do, unless you're a profession, like unless you're paid, which again, I don't know that I would want to be like a hired writer. It just doesn't seem to be something I would like to do. But if you're doing what you're doing for you, then you're not necessarily, I mean, you shouldn't be at least completely doing it for the attention of others. You should be doing whatever you're doing for you, because if you do it for the attention of others, or for money, or for praise, or other types of praise, then it's going to be way harder to have the drive to keep going and to finish and to tell a story that makes your life just better. And it's not even just with storytelling, it's with everything. It's with business starting, it's with any other hobby. So I would definitely say that if you have any negative feedback, send it my way. I mean, I'd be interested. I'm going to write more books. I'm not going to correct these books for you because I'm not your servant, but I would love to hear it. I mean, I would love to hear what thoughts you do have. A lot of it I probably will expect. I mean, there's certain things, like I said, where you have that early cringe factor where you look back at the stuff you wrote in the beginning and you were like, wow, it could be better here, it could be better there. Like I said, I will definitely talk about that next time. Another thing I'm going to talk about next time is following up. So this was episode 2, and I had a lot of stuff to talk about this episode, but next episode, I'm going to talk about once you start something, once you create something and put it out there, the pressure you feel about following it up, whether it's well received or not. It's hard to get past that initial stress level of like, can I do this as good? So I'll talk about that next time. But yeah, again, hope you enjoyed this episode. This has been Tuesday Night Fiction. Everyone, thanks for listening. If you made it this far, I mean, Jesus, you're the best. I love you, and you're a genius. You are the genius. Welcome to the Civil Gang. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, share as much as possible, especially if you want those giveaway books. And I'll talk to you next time. Next week we have chapter 3, which is called The Enemy of My Enemy, and then the following week we'll be discussing that. Until then, thanks again for listening in. I'll talk to you soon.